You were always the greedy one, a mistake we never should have kept. My father said that into a microphone at my wedding reception, off a note card in front of 40 guests. I was 26, standing in heels on a dance floor I'd paid for myself. 5 years of silence came after. Until last Thursday, 6:47 a.m., sign the deed. It's the least you owe us. He needed my name on a property transfer to save their retirement home. I sat down, pen in hand, and turned to page 2 of the ownership history. My sister's name had been listed there for 11 years. She'd never told a soul. I didn't sign. I photographed every page and folded the document back into its envelope. 3 days later, I opened that folder at my parents' kitchen table with my father's 2 brothers sitting across from me. What they read cost my father the last 2 people still willing to believe him. Before I go on, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story speaks to you. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now let me take you back to my wedding day, to the note card my father prepared, and the 6 words he read into that microphone that 40 people witnessed, and I was never meant to survive. My wedding was supposed to be the one day where the family math finally added up to 0. For 26 years, I had been the daughter who cost too much. Not because I was expensive, I started working at 16 and never stopped, but because my existence was treated like a debt my parents were forced to co-sign. My sister, Chloe, was the investment. I was the overhead. When I got engaged to Mark, I didn't ask my father for a dime. I knew the answer before the question could leave my mouth. We sat in their living room, the same beige carpet I'd vacuumed every Saturday for a decade, and I told them we'd found a venue. My father, Arthur, didn't look up from his tablet. He just adjusted his glasses and said, "I hope you've been saving, Sarah. A mistake is one thing, but a mistake that expects a handout is another." That was the baseline. I paid for the venue, the catering, the photographer, and even my own dress. I worked overtime shifts as a dental hygienist for 18 months to make sure every receipt had my name on it. I wanted a day where nobody could claim I owed them for the air I was breathing. But my family had a way of finding new ways to bill me. 4 months before the wedding, we went dress shopping for the bridal party. My mother, Eleanor, sat in the boutique chair like she was presiding over a court. Chloe tried on a silk floor-length gown that cost $600. It was more than my own wedding shoes and veil combined. Chloe looked at herself in the mirror, smoothing the fabric over her hips, and sighed. "It's a bit tight, but it's the only one that really works for my skin tone." "We'll take it," my mother said. Then she turned to me. "Sarah, write the check. Chloe's had a hard month with her car repairs. It's the least you can do, considering she's making the effort to stand up there for you." I looked at my mother. She wasn't asking. She was stating a family law. In our house, Chloe's hard months were a permanent state of being, and my stability was a resource to be harvested. I looked at Chloe, who was already texting someone, completely unconcerned with who was paying for the silk on her back. I wrote the check. I told myself it was peace money. If I paid for the dress, maybe they'd show up and just be a family for 8 hours. I handed the slip of paper to the cashier while my father stood by the door, checking his watch. He didn't thank me. He didn't even acknowledge the transaction. He just patted Chloe on the shoulder and told her she looked like a star. I was the one with the checkbook, but I was invisible in the reflection of that mirror. That was the pattern. At the rehearsal dinner, which Mark's parents paid for, my father spent the entire night talking to our guests about Chloe's upcoming promotion at the real estate firm. He didn't mention that I'd just finished my certification. He didn't mention Mark's new job. He acted like he was the host of a party for his favorite child, and I was just the person who happened to be getting married in the background. "I have a special speech ready for tomorrow," he told my Aunt Martha, loud enough for the whole table to hear. He tapped a cream-colored note card against his palm. "It's time we put everything out in the open. People need to know the truth about how this family stays together." He looked directly at me when he said it. There was a sharpness in his eyes that made the steak in my stomach feel like lead. My mother saw it too. She just tucked a stray hair behind her ear and went back to her salad. She never stopped him. She just managed the silence he left behind. "Is it a toast, Dad?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "It's a statement, Sarah," he replied. "A long time coming." I spent the night before my wedding wondering what he meant. I thought maybe, in his own twisted way, he was going to apologize for the years of mistake comments. I thought maybe he was going to acknowledge that I'd built a life without their help. I was still naive enough to think that the truth meant something that would set me free. I didn't know that to my father, the truth was just another weapon he'd been sharpening for 26 years. I didn't know that Chloe's silk dress and her hard months were part of a much larger ledger I wasn't allowed to see. The morning of the wedding, my mother came into the bridal suite while I was getting my hair done. She didn't hug me. She just adjusted the lace on my shoulder and whispered, "Just try not to react to your father today. He's been under a lot of stress with the house. He just wants things to be right." "What does that mean, Mom?" I asked. "It means you know how he is," she said. I did know. I'd known since I was old enough to realize Chloe got the new bike while I got the hand-me-downs with the rusted chains. I'd known since I realized my college fund had been emptied to pay for Chloe's spiritual retreat in Europe. I was the backstop. I was the person who kept the walls up so they could live comfortably inside them. Standing there in my white dress, I felt like a fool. I had paid for a stage, and I was handing my father the microphone. I thought I was buying a memory. I was actually buying the most expensive insult of my life. I walked down the aisle toward Mark, and for a moment, I forgot the note card in my father's pocket. I saw my husband, my friends, and the life I'd actually chosen. I thought I had finally moved past the debt of being a mistake. But the speech was still coming, and the property deed that would change everything was already sitting in a drawer in my father's office, dated 11 years prior. The reception was held in a renovated barn on the outskirts of town. It was exactly what Mark and I wanted: string lights, long wooden tables, and a sense of breathing room. I had spent 6 months coordinating with the florist and the rental company, making sure every candle was placed just right. For a few hours, I actually felt like the lead character in my own life. I was dancing with my friends, laughing with Mark's family, and forgetting the way my parents had looked at me in the vestibule of the church. Then the music faded. The coordinator tapped me on the shoulder and pointed toward the small stage. My father was standing there, adjusting the microphone stand with a practiced, somber efficiency. He didn't look like a man about to give a celebratory toast. He looked like a man about to deliver a verdict. He pulled the cream-colored note card from his breast pocket. The room went quiet, that expectant silence that usually precedes a heartwarming story about a bride's childhood. My mother sat at the front table, her hands folded over her clutch purse, her face a mask of loyal neutrality. Chloe was next to her, looking bored, swirling the ice in her glass. "Most fathers stand up here and talk about how hard it is to give their daughter away," my father began. His voice was steady, projected with the kind of authority he used at his firm. "But for Alina and me, today is different. Today isn't about loss. It's about an ending." He cleared his throat and looked down at the card. "We spent 26 years trying to make up for a choice we made. We provided, we sacrificed, and we endured. Sarah, you were always the greedy one, a mistake we never should have kept." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was heavy. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the barn. I saw Mark's mother drop her fork. I saw my best friend Jenna put her hand over her mouth. I stayed standing on the edge of the dance floor, my hand still resting on Mark's arm. I could feel him tense up beside me, his entire body turning into a pillar of protective anger, but I couldn't move. My father didn't flinch. He didn't offer a "just kidding" or a smile to take the edge off. He just tucked the card back into his pocket, stepped off the stage, and walked back to his seat like he'd just read a weather report. "Did he just say that?" Mark whispered. His voice was low and vibrating. I didn't answer. I looked at my mother. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She was busy smoothing the tablecloth, her fingers moving in small, nervous circles. She had heard him practice that. She had known those words were on that card, and she had let him walk up those 3 wooden steps to say them in front of everyone I loved. The cost of my family wasn't just the money I'd spent on Chloe's dresses or the tuition they'd diverted. The real cost was the public annihilation of my dignity. He had waited until I was at my most vulnerable, in white, in front of my new husband's family, to settle a debt that only existed in his head. I walked over to the head table. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. My father was already picking up his wine glass. "You need to leave," I said. My voice was surprisingly calm. It was the calm of someone who had just watched their house burn down and realized they didn't have to worry about the chores anymore. "Don't be dramatic, Sarah," my father said, not even looking up. "It was the truth. Everyone here knows it. You've always been a drain on us." "I paid for your dinner tonight, Dad," I said. "I paid for the chair you're sitting in. I paid for the microphone you just used to call me a mistake. Get out, now." My mother finally looked up. "Sarah, please, not here." "Think of the guests." "I am thinking of the guests," I said. "I'm thinking they shouldn't have to spend another minute with people who treat their daughter like a line item in a bankruptcy filing. Mark, call the coordinator. I want them escorted out." Chloe stood up then, her $600 dress shimmering in the candlelight. "You're actually kicking us out, over a speech? God, you really are as sensitive as Dad says." "The dress is mine, too, Chloe," I reminded her. "If you want to keep it, walk out the door before I decide it's a rental." The exit wasn't loud. There was no screaming. It was just the sound of 40 people watching a family fracture in real time. My father stood up, adjusted his jacket, and walked out with his chin held high as if he were the one taking the moral high ground. My mother followed 2 steps behind him, silent as always. Chloe trailed after them, huffing about her shoes. When the barn doors swung shut behind them, the room didn't go back to normal. The music started again, but the energy was gone. My mother-in-law came over and hugged me, but I could see the pity in her eyes. That was the first undeniable cost. My wedding day was no longer the day I married Mark. It was the day my father told 40 people he regretted my life. I spent the rest of the night acting like I was okay. I danced, I cut the cake, I thanked people for coming. But every time I looked at the empty chairs at the front table, I felt a new kind of coldness settling in. The silence started that night. I blocked their numbers before we even got to the hotel. I didn't check social media. I didn't call my aunts. I simply stopped existing in their world, and for 5 years I made sure they didn't exist in mine. I thought I had won. I thought that by cutting them out, I'd finally stopped paying the mistake tax. I built a career, bought a home with Mark, and found a version of myself that wasn't defined by someone else's resentment. But 5 years is a long time for a lie to grow. While I was building my life, my father was building a different kind of trap. He wasn't done with me. He just needed a bigger microphone and a debt so large I couldn't walk away from it. The 6 words he said at the wedding were just the opening statement. The real trial wouldn't start until that text message arrived at 6:47 a.m., 5 years later. 5 years of silence is a long time, but it's also remarkably fast. In those years, the world got quiet in a way I hadn't known was possible. I didn't have to brace myself before opening my phone. I didn't have to wonder if a compliment was actually a lead-in for a loan request. Mark and I bought a small house with a garden that actually bloomed because I finally had the emotional bandwidth to remember to water things. I was a senior dental hygienist. I was a wife. I was a person who didn't owe anyone for the privilege of existing. The break was clean, or so I thought. The silence didn't break with a bang. It broke with a vibration on my nightstand at 6:47 a.m. on a Thursday. I saw the name Dad on the screen, a contact I'd never deleted, mostly as a digital scar. I didn't answer. I didn't even open the text until I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of my office, a cup of coffee cooling in the cup holder. Sign the deed. It's the least you owe us. The courier is coming to your office today. Don't be selfish, Sarah. We're losing the house. I stared at the screen until the light timed out. The least you owe us. It was the same math. The same old ledger where I was born in the red and could never work my way into the black. I felt that familiar, cold knot tie itself in my stomach. I thought about the wedding. I thought about the note card. I thought about how he hadn't seen me in 5 years, hadn't asked if I was happy, hadn't asked about Mark, but he knew exactly where I worked. I went inside, but I couldn't focus. Every time I looked at a patient's chart, I saw those 6 words from the wedding reception. At 11:00 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail. It was my mother. Her voice was thin, the pitch wavering in a way she only used when she was truly desperate or truly directed by my father. "Sarah, honey, please," she sobbed into the recording. The sound of her crying was a sound I'd spent my childhood trying to prevent. It was my primary job for 2 decades. Keep Mom from crying so Dad wouldn't get angry. "We're facing foreclosure. We have nowhere to go. Your father, he's worked so hard and it's all slipping away. They said if we can just transfer the deed to someone with your credit standing, we can restructure the debt. It's just a signature, Sarah. Please, do this one last thing for your family. Don't let us end up on the street." I sat in the break room and played it 3 times. The guilt was a physical weight, a ghost limb I thought I'd amputated but could still feel throbbing. I looked out the window at the sunny parking lot. If I didn't sign and they lost the house, I'd be the daughter who watched her elderly parents go homeless. That was the narrative they were already writing. By lunch, the piece I'd built for 5 years was gone. My sister Chloe began posting on social media. Posts Jenna, my best friend, immediately screenshotted and sent to me. "It's funny how some people get successful and suddenly forget where they came from," one post read, over a picture of Chloe looking pensive at a coffee shop. Imagine having everything and watching your own parents lose their home because you're too busy to sign a piece of paper. Blood isn't always thicker than water, I guess. Some people are just cold. The comments were worse. Distant cousins, old family friends, people who had been at the wedding and witnessed the speech but apparently had very short memories. They were all rallying behind the poor, struggling parents and the sacrificial sister who was staying by their side. The harm was widening. It wasn't just a text anymore, it was a campaign. My parents were positioning themselves as the victims of my greed, the very word my father had used on the dance floor. They were using my success, the success they hadn't contributed a cent toward, as proof that I was the villain. They weren't just asking for a signature. They were asking me to sign my name to a toxic debt to save a house I hadn't stepped foot in for half a decade. I called Mark. "They're losing the house," I said, my voice shaking. "They want me to take over the deed to stop the foreclosure." "Sarah, no," Mark said. He didn't hesitate. "You know how this ends. You sign that and you're tied to them for the next 30 years. Their debt becomes our debt. Our house, our credit, our future, it all goes into their mouth." "But they'll be homeless, Mark. My mother is crying on my voicemail." "They have Chloe," Mark reminded me. "Why isn't Chloe signing?" They said her credit isn't good enough because of her car repairs and the bad luck she's had. Convenient, Mark said. I knew he was right. I knew it in my marrow. But the family law is a powerful thing. It's a gravity that pulls you back toward the center of the wreckage. I felt like I was 21 again, standing in that dress boutique, writing a check for a sister who didn't thank me, just to keep my mother from shaking. I told myself I'd just look at the paperwork. I'd just see how bad it was. Maybe there was a middle ground. Maybe I could help them find an apartment. I wanted to be the bigger person. I wanted to prove I wasn't the greedy one he'd described. That was my mistake. I was still trying to argue with a man who had already decided I was the enemy. The courier arrived at 3:00 p.m. He handed me a thick, legal-sized envelope. I took it into my office and locked the door. My hands were trembling as I tore the tab. I expected to see a standard mortgage restructuring or a quitclaim deed. I expected to see my parents' names and a mountain of debt from bad investments. I didn't expect to see what was actually on page 2. I didn't expect to see that while I was being called a drain and a mistake at my wedding, a completely different financial reality had been happening in the shadows. The house wasn't just in trouble. The house had been a weapon for a long time. And as I started reading the ownership history, the cold knot in my stomach turned into a sharp, piercing clarity. I wasn't being asked to save my parents. I was being asked to pay for a betrayal that started 11 years ago. The envelope sat on my desk like a live round. I didn't open it until I'd finished my last patient of the day. I wanted to be alone. I wanted the office to be empty so if I started shaking again, nobody would see the greedy daughter losing her nerve. When the last car pulled out of the parking lot, I locked the front door and sat in my small office. I pulled out the documents. It wasn't just a simple property transfer. It was a comprehensive debt assumption agreement. My father hadn't just asked for my help, he had prepared a legal cage. If I signed these, I wasn't just helping with a mortgage. I was legally identifying myself as the primary party responsible for a series of high-interest personal loans that had been rolled into the property's equity. I turned to page 2, looking for the history of the title. I expected to see my parents' names, perhaps a refinance from 5 years ago when things supposedly started slipping. I saw my sister's name instead. Chloe Elizabeth Miller, listed as the primary owner. Date of transfer, July 14th, 11 years ago. I stopped breathing for a second. 11 years ago. That was 6 years before my wedding. That was the year I was working 2 jobs to put myself through school because my parents said they were broke and struggling to keep the lights on. That was the year they told me I couldn't have a car for graduation because the mortgage was too heavy. They had secretly gifted the entire house to Chloe while I was still living in the basement, paying them $300 a month in room and board to help them survive. But the spillover didn't stay in that envelope. My phone started buzzing, not with texts, but with notifications. My father had taken the fight to the second arena, my professional life. He hadn't just called my uncles. He had gone to the community Facebook group for our town, a group with 6,000 members, including most of my patients. He had posted a photo of the house I now knew belonged to Chloe, with a caption that made my blood run cold. It's a sad day when a local professional, someone you trust with your health, decides that her own parents aren't worth a signature. We raised Sarah to be better than this. We sacrificed everything so she could have that office, and now, as we face the street, she turns her back. Greed is a powerful thing. It changes people. Just ask the girl who kicked her own family out of her wedding. The comments were a bloodbath. I have an appointment with her next Tuesday, not anymore. I always thought she seemed a bit cold. Now I know why. How can you fix people's smiles when you're breaking your mother's heart? One of my coworkers, a dental assistant named Maria, sent me a private message. Sarah, have you seen the town page? People are calling the office. Dr. Aris is asking what's going on. He's worried about the reputation of the practice. The story was getting bigger than me. It was leaking out of the family kitchen and into the place where I made my living. My father wasn't just trying to save a house. He was trying to dismantle the life I'd built as punishment for my 5 years of silence. He was using the town's collective sense of family values to stone me in the public square. I looked back at the paperwork. I looked at Chloe's name. 11 years. While I was paying rent to my parents, I was actually paying the mortgage on a house my sister already owned. While I was writing that $600 check for a bridesmaid dress, I was being treated like a guest in a home I was unknowingly subsidizing. And now, Chloe had apparently bled the equity dry. There were 3 separate liens from private lenders. She hadn't just lived there. She had used the house like an ATM for a decade, and now that the machine was empty and the bank was knocking, they wanted me to step in and refill the tank. They weren't losing their retirement home. They were trying to stop Chloe from losing her asset. I felt a strange shift inside me. The guilt, that heavy, wet blanket that had followed me since childhood, simply evaporated. You can only feel guilty if you believe you've actually done something wrong. Looking at the dates on those documents, I realized I hadn't been a drain on them. I had been their silent partner. I had been their unwitting benefactor. I didn't call my father. I didn't reply to the Facebook post. I didn't even call Mark. I took my phone and opened the camera app. I laid the title history flat on my desk under the bright LED exam light. I took a high-resolution photo of page 2. Then I took a photo of the debt schedule showing Chloe's signatures on the predatory loans from 2 years ago. I folded the documents back into the envelope. I didn't sign them. The social pressure was mounting. My phone was a ticking clock of notifications, insults, and disappointed messages from people I hadn't spoken to since high school. My boss was concerned. My reputation was being shredded in real time. They thought they were making the world too small for me to breathe in. They thought if they embarrassed me enough, I'd sign just to make the noise stop. That was their mistake. They forgot that when you spend your whole life being told you're a mistake, you eventually stop caring what the crowd thinks. You stop trying to be the good daughter, and you start being the person who keeps the receipts. I had the receipts now, and I knew exactly who needed to see them. The uncles were the next move. The 2 men who were currently calling me a monster on my father's behalf. The 2 men who believed in family loyalty above all else. I was going to show them exactly what kind of loyalty my father practiced in the dark. The story wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about the math, and the math was finally going to be public. The clarity of the documents didn't make the weight of the social pressure any lighter. By Friday morning, my phone was a graveyard of notifications. I had 3 missed calls from my office manager and a text from my father's youngest brother, Uncle Ray. Sarah, we're all meeting at your parents' house tomorrow to discuss the move out. Your father is devastated. I never thought I'd see the day my niece would put her own mother on the curb over a bank form. We're disappointed. Disappointed. It was the family's favorite word for when I didn't comply. It was the word they used when I wouldn't let Chloe borrow my car, or when I didn't give up my summer earnings to pay for her discovery year in Vermont. I didn't reply to Ray. I called Jenna. Jenna has been my best friend since we were 10. She was the one who held my hair back when I was sick, and the one who stood as my maid of honor while my father told 40 people I shouldn't exist. She's also a paralegal at one of the biggest real estate firms in the state. I need you to look at something, I said when she picked up. I'm sending you 3 photos. Don't ask me how I got them, just tell me I'm not crazy. I sent the images of the title history and the lien's signatures. I waited. I could hear her typing in the background, the rhythmic click-clack of a mechanical keyboard. "Sarah," she said, her voice dropping an octave, "this isn't a foreclosure due to hard times. This is a systematic strip mining of an asset." Chloe signed for a $60,000 personal line of credit 2 years ago, then a second one 8 months later. She used the house as collateral for things that have nothing to do with a mortgage. And the title, she's been the owner since she was 19. 11 years, I said. They gifted it to her the year I was working double shifts at the diner to pay my tuition. They've been lying to the entire family, Jenna said. If I call my boss, he can get a certified copy of the full encumbrance report. But Sarah, the pressure they're putting on you, they're trying to make you the successor in interest. If you sign that deed, you aren't just helping your parents. You are legally stepping into Chloe's shoes to pay back those private lenders. You'd be on the hook for nearly $200,000 of her bad decisions. The support didn't make me feel victorious. It made me feel sick. Having a professional confirm the betrayal just made the wound deeper. It was one thing to suspect my father was a liar. It was another to have a legal professional point to the exact line where the lie became a crime. What do I do, Jenna? They're trashing my name in the town group. My boss is asking questions. People think I'm letting them go homeless. You show them, Jenna said. Her voice was firm, the kind of tone she used when she was prepping a witness. You don't fight them on Facebook. You don't argue with your mother's tears. You bring the math to the table. They're using your uncles as muscle because your uncles believe in a version of your father that doesn't exist. Give them the version that does. She sent me a PDF 10 minutes later. It was a formal summary of the title search. It was clean, black and white, and devastating. It listed every loan, every date, and every signature. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a shield. All my life, I'd been fighting with my feelings, trying to explain why I was hurt or why things were unfair. My father always won those fights because he was louder and more cert. He could outshout a feeling. He couldn't outshout a recorded deed. I looked at the PDF on my screen. I saw the signature on the gift deed from 11 years ago. My father's signature. My mother's signature. They had sat in a lawyer's office a decade ago and decided that one daughter deserved a house and the other deserved a bill. They had maintained that lie through my graduation, through my first job, and through my wedding. I realized then that my father wasn't just under stress. He was a person who viewed people as utility. Chloe was his pride, so she got the asset. I was his safety net, so I got the liability. I went to my printer and hit print. I didn't just print one copy. I printed 4. I put them in manila folders. Then I sent a text to the group chat my father had started with his brothers and my mother. I'll be at the house tomorrow at 10:00 a.m. with the documents. I want Uncle Ray and Uncle Pete there. Since this is a family matter about the house, everyone should see exactly what's being signed. My father replied instantly. Finally, I knew you'd come around, Sarah. We'll have coffee ready. It's time to put this behind us and be a family again. Be a family again. To him, that meant I would finally accept my place as the person who pays. He thought he'd bullied me into submission. He thought the public shaming had worked. I looked at the folders on my desk. I wasn't going there to be a family. I was going there to be a witness. That night, for the first time in a week, I slept. I didn't dream about weddings or microphones or beige carpets. I just slept the way people do when they finally know the truth is on their side. The manila folders sat on my passenger seat like a physical weight as I drove to my office the next morning. I wasn't there to work on teeth. I was there to use the office scanner. I needed copies, digital, physical, and backed up in 3 different cloud drives. If my father had taught me anything, it was that the person who controls the paper controls the truth. I spent an hour looking at the signature on the second lien. Chloe's handwriting hadn't changed much since high school. It was loopy, decorative, and entirely unconcerned with the consequences of the words it was forming. She had signed for $80,000 on a Tuesday morning in October, likely while I was cleaning instruments 3 miles away. She hadn't just been having a hard month. She had been liquidating the family home to fund a lifestyle that was never hers to begin with. The leverage was now a physical thing. It wasn't just a suspicion or a feeling of being wronged. It was a high-resolution PDF that proved my father was a fraud and my sister was a thief. I called Mark from the break room. "I have everything," I said. "I'm going there tomorrow." "Do you want me to come?" he asked. I could hear the car keys jingling in his hand. He was ready to be the shield he'd been since the wedding day. "No," I said. "If you're there, my father will make it about you. He'll say you're poisoning my mind or that you're the reason I've turned greedy. I need to be the only one sitting across from them. I need him to look at me and realize he can't blame a man for the facts on the page. Sarah, he's going to be vicious. He's already trashing you to the whole town." "Let him," I said. "The louder he yells, the more he looks like someone with something to hide. I'm not going there to argue. I'm going there to deliver the bill." I spent the afternoon preparing. I didn't just have the deed, I had the math. I spent 3 hours with my old bank statements from my early 20s. I found the transfers. Every month for 3 years, I had sent my mother $300 for household expenses. I calculated the total, $10,800. I had paid over $10,000 to help with the mortgage on a house that was already in my sister's name. I added a page to the folder. Repayment of unauthorized rental contributions. Then I looked at the bridesmaid dress check. I found the digital image in my banking app, $612. I printed that too. Sister's personal expenses subsidized under duress. By 5:00 p.m., the folder was an audit of my entire life. It was no longer about a foreclosure. It was about a decade of financial abuse masked as family loyalty. The leverage didn't just change the house situation, it changed my entire history. I wasn't the greedy mistake. I was the primary financier of a family that hated me for my utility. I sent one last text to the group chat. 10:00 a.m. sharp. I expect the paperwork I was sent to be on the table, unsigned. My father replied with a thumbs-up emoji. He still thought he was winning. He thought my demand for the uncles to be there was just me looking for a way to save face while I surrendered. He thought the public shaming on Facebook had broken me. I went home and sat in the garden Mark and I had built. I looked at the lavender. I looked at the siding on our house, a house we actually owned with a mortgage we actually paid. I realized that for 5 years I had been running away from a ghost. I had been trying to outrun the feeling of being a mistake by being perfect, by being successful, by being silent. But silence is just a way of letting the liar keep talking. The leverage I held wasn't just about the house. It was about the microphone. Tomorrow, at that kitchen table, I was going to take it back. I wasn't going to be the girl standing in heels on a dance floor while her father read from a note card. I was going to be the woman who handed him the truth and watched him try to find a way to make it sound like a joke. I felt a strange, cold peace. It's the feeling you get when you realize the person you were afraid of is actually just a small man with a lot of secrets. I checked the town Facebook group one last time. The post was still there. 142 likes, 56 comments. People I had known since kindergarten were calling for a boycott of my office. "Let them watch," I whispered to the empty garden. I put the folders in my bag. I was ready. The leverage was real, the proof was undeniable, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who was going to have to explain myself. The 3 days leading up to the meeting felt like a countdown I was finally in control of. My father sent 4 more texts, each one more expansive than the last. He talked about new beginnings and how he'd already spoken to the bank about the technicalities of my signature. He was already spending the credit he thought I was about to provide. I didn't correct him. I didn't even respond. On Friday afternoon, I made my first logistical move. I called Uncle Ray. Out of the 2 brothers, Ray was the one who valued his reputation most. He was a retired high school principal. He lived for procedure and doing things by the book. "Uncle Ray," I said when he picked up, "I'm coming tomorrow at 10. I want to make sure you and Uncle Pete are actually inside the house when I get there, not in the driveway. I want us all at the kitchen table. My father says he's explained the situation to you, but I want to make sure we're all looking at the same documents." "Sarah will be there," Ray said, his voice stiff. "Have to tell you, I'm not happy about how you've handled this. Your father is a proud man, to have to beg his own daughter." "I'm not coming there to be begged, Ray," I interrupted. "I'm coming there to settle the debt, just be at the table." I hung up before he could pivot back to a lecture. That was the logistical move, ensuring witnesses were physically present in the arena where the lie was most comfortable. My emotional move was harder. I had to look at the photos of my wedding one last time. I scrolled through the digital album until I found the shot of my father at the microphone. He looked so sure of himself. He looked like a man who was untouchable because he had the audience's sympathy. I remembered the way my heart had physically hurt in that moment, the heat in my face, the feeling of the floor becoming liquid. I leaned into that memory. I didn't try to push it away or heal from it. I used it as a whetstone. I reminded myself that the man in that photo was currently trying to ruin my husband's financial future to pay for a sister who wouldn't even thank me for the sacrifice. I allowed the hurt to turn into a quiet, cold resolve. I wasn't going into that house as a victim. I was going in as an auditor. The risk move was the hardest. I sent an email to my boss, Dr. Aris. "Dr. Aris, I am aware of the comments on the town Facebook page. I am handling a private family legal matter tomorrow morning that involves the documentation of these claims. I would appreciate it if you held any judgment until Monday morning. I will bring the certified property records to the office to clear the practice's name. Thank you for your patience." It was a gamble. If I failed to shut my father down tomorrow, I was essentially admitting to my boss that I was a liability. I was putting my career on the line to prove a point. But I knew that if I didn't defend my name now, the lie would eventually become the truth in the eyes of the town. Saturday morning arrived with a gray, low-hanging mist. I dressed in a dark blazer and jeans, professional but functional. I didn't wear jewelry. I didn't wear the watch my parents had given me for my 21st birthday. I wanted nothing on my body that they could claim they had provided. I put the 4 manila folders in my bag. I checked my phone. One last text from my father at 9:15 a.m. "Coffee S on. Chloe is here too. Let's get this done so we can have lunch as a family." Chloe was there. That was good. I wanted the beneficiary of the fraud to see the moment the bank closed. I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home at exactly 9:58 a.m. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The siding was peeling near the garage, the first physical sign of the neglect that happened when you treat a home like an ATM instead of a shelter. I saw Uncle Ray's car and Uncle Pete's truck. They were there. I sat in the car for 60 seconds. I practiced the first sentence in my head. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to cry. I wanted to be as clinical as a surgeon. I reached into the back seat and touched the folders. The weight was right. The facts were ready. I stepped out of the car. The front door opened before I even reached the porch. My father stood there, a wide, performative smile on his face. He reached out as if to hug me, but I stepped past him, my bag held firmly at my side. "Let's go to the kitchen," I said. I didn't look at the photos in the hallway. I didn't look at the height marks on the pantry door. I walked straight to the oak table where my mother, my sister, and my two uncles were already seated. The paperwork, the thick legal envelope from the courier, was sitting in the center of the table next to a plate of cookies. I sat down at the head of the table. I didn't take off my blazer. I didn't reach for a cookie. I just looked at the 6 people who had spent 5 years believing I was the greedy mistake of the family. "I'm glad everyone could make it," I said. My voice was steady. It was the quietest I had ever felt. "Before we talk about me signing anything, we need to talk about what's actually being sold." I opened the first folder. I didn't wait for my father to start. I didn't wait for the usual opening monologue about how much they'd sacrificed or how difficult the current climate was for retirees. I placed the first manila folder on the oak table and slid it directly toward Uncle Ray. "Before we talk about my signature," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a cold draft, "we need to talk about the title. Ray, Pete, you both called me a monster this week. You told me I was letting my parents go homeless. I'd like you to open that folder to page 2. My father reached for the folder, his face reddening. "Sarah, this is a private matter. We don't need to bore your uncles with the history." "Sit down, Arthur," Uncle Ray said. He didn't look up. He was already reading. The kitchen was silent. I watched Ray's eyes move down the page. I watched the moment he hit the date, July 14th, 11 years ago. I watched him find the name, Chloe Elizabeth Miller. Ray looked at my father. Then he looked at Chloe, who was leaning against the counter, picking at her manicure. "Arthur," Ray said, his voice dropping into that principal's register. "Why does this deed say Chloe has owned this house since she was 19? My mother made a small, wounded sound in the back of her throat and began frantically smoothing the tablecloth. "It was for tax purposes, Ray. We were just trying to plan for the future. You know how the laws are." "Tax purposes?" I asked. I didn't look at her. I looked at the table. "You told me you were broke that year. You told me you couldn't help with my books because the mortgage was too high. You took $300 a month from me for rent while I was living in the basement. You were charging me rent to live in a house you had already given to Chloe for free. We were protecting the asset." My father shouted. He stood up, his chair screeching against the linoleum. "You've always been so clinical about money, Sarah. So cold. We knew if we gave it to you, you'd just see it as a business transaction. Chloe needed a safety net." "She didn't get a safety net, Dad," I said. I slid the second folder over. This one went to Uncle Pete. "She got a credit card with 4 walls. Pete, look at the lien history. Look at the signatures from 2 years ago." Uncle Pete was the quiet brother, a man who worked in HVAC and understood the value of a hard day's pay. He flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing. $80,000. "Chloe, what is an equity-based personal lifestyle loan?" Chloe finally looked up. She didn't look ashamed. She looked annoyed. "I was starting a business, Pete. It didn't take off. Dad said it was fine. He said the house had plenty of value left." "It didn't take off because it was a series of vacations and a lease on a car you couldn't afford," I said. "And when the bank came to collect, you didn't go to Chloe. You came to me. You sent me a document that would make me the successor in interest. You weren't asking me to save your home. You were asking me to pay off Chloe's $80,000 vacation fund so she wouldn't have to file for bankruptcy." My father slammed his hand on the table. The plate of cookies rattled. "You have plenty. You and Mark live in that big house. You're a senior hygienist. You have the credit to fix this. It's just a signature. Why are you being so vindictive over a house you don't even live in?" "Because you called me a mistake," I said. The room went completely still. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to cut out. "You stood on a stage I paid for," I continued, my voice lower now, "and you told 40 people I was a greedy mistake you never should have kept. You said that while you were sitting on a secret that involved taking $10,000 of my waitressing money to pay the mortgage on Chloe's gift. You used me as a bank while you treated me like a burden. And then you went on Facebook and told the whole town I was a monster. Uncle Ray closed the folder. He looked at my father with a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. Arthur, you told me Sarah was trying to force you into a nursing home. You told me she was trying to seize the equity for herself. She is, my father yelled, pointing a finger at me. Look at her, she comes in here with folders like she's a lawyer. She's trying to humiliate us. The facts are doing that, Dad, I said. I'm just the one who printed them out. I turned to my mother. Did you know, when you called me crying on Tuesday, did you know that Chloe had already signed away the equity? Did you know she's the reason the bank is calling? My mother wouldn't look at me. She just kept smoothing that tablecloth over and over until the fabric was bunched up in her fists. We just wanted to keep the family together, Sarah. We didn't want you to be angry. You didn't want me to be angry, so you lied to me for 11 years, I said. You let me pay for my own wedding, my own clothes, my own education, while you funded her life with the house I was told was your retirement security. And now you want me to sign a document that ruins my credit for the next 20 years so Chloe doesn't have to feel the consequences of her own choices. I stood up. I pulled the unsigned deed out of the courier envelope. I'm not signing it, I said. Then we lose everything, Chloe shrieked. She finally moved from the counter, her face contorted. You're actually going to let Mom and Dad get evicted? You're that heartless. No, I said. I'm not letting them get evicted. You are. It's your house, Chloe. It's been your house since you were 19. If you can't pay the debt you took out, that's between you and the bank. I'm not the one taking their home. You already spent it. I looked at Uncle Ray and Uncle Pete. I assume you won't be needing me to do the right thing anymore. Ray stood up. He didn't look at me, he looked at my father. Arthur, don't call me again. Not for a loan, not for a move, not for anything. You used my name to bully your daughter into a trap. I'm going to go home and tell my wife exactly what I saw in these folders, and I'm going to make sure the town knows the truth about that Facebook post. Ray, wait, my father started, but Pete was already standing up too. You called her a mistake, Art, Pete said, his voice thick with disappointment. After everything she did for you, I don't think I can look at you right now. The two brothers walked out. The screen door thudded shut behind them. The kitchen felt cavernous. My father sat back down, his shoulders slumped, the smugness finally drained from his face. He looked like an old man who had finally run out of people to lie to. Chloe was back to her phone, her thumbs flying, likely looking for the next person to bail her out. I picked up my bag, I left the folders on the table. Sarah, my mother whispered. Where are you going? I'm going home, I said. To the house I actually own. With the husband who actually loves me. Don't call me again, Mom. My debt was paid the second he picked up that microphone 5 years ago. Consider the interest settled. I walked out the front door. I didn't look back at the peeling paint or the overgrown lawn. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, my hands on the steering wheel. I wasn't shaking anymore. I looked at the house in the rearview mirror. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a mistake. I felt like the only person in that family who knew how to tell the truth. I started the engine and drove away. I had a life to get back to, a life that didn't require a single manila folder to prove it was real. The fallout didn't take long to settle. Within 48 hours of me walking out of that kitchen, the town Facebook group post was deleted. Uncle Ray, true to his word, had posted a point-by-point rebuttal that included the words financial elder abuse and systemic deception. The neighbors who had called for a boycott of my office began sending sheepish apology emails. Some even brought flowers to the front desk. I accepted the apologies, but I didn't forget the names. My father and mother stayed in the house for another 3 months. In the end, Chloe couldn't find a third safety net. The bank moved forward with the foreclosure. They didn't end up on the street, though. Uncle Pete helped them move into a small, two-bedroom apartment near his house. He told me he's keeping the lease in his name only. He's learned the hard way that in our family, a signature is a liability. Chloe moved 2 towns over. She doesn't talk to the uncles, and she certainly doesn't talk to me. Last I heard, she was trying to crowdfund a wellness retreat business. Some people never change their math, they just look for new people to balance the equation. I haven't spoken to my father since that day at the table. My mother calls once a month and leaves a voicemail. She doesn't mention the house or the money. She talks about the weather, or a recipe she tried, or how the new apartment gets good morning light. She's trying to pretend the last 26 years were just a misunderstanding. I don't delete the messages, but I don't call back. There is a specific kind of peace that comes from finally stopping the search for an apology that will never be sincere. I saw a photo of my father recently on a cousin's social media. He was at a backyard barbecue, sitting in a folding chair, looking older and smaller than I remembered. He wasn't holding a microphone. He was just a man in a beige shirt, holding a paper plate, looking at a world that no longer saw him as the hero of the story. I think back to my wedding day sometimes. I think about the girl in the white dress, standing on a dance floor she paid for, waiting for her father to love her. I wish I could tell her that she was never a mistake. She was just the only one in the room who was actually willing to pay the price for the truth. I look at Mark across our dinner table now. We don't talk about debts or mistakes. We talk about the garden, our jobs, and the life we've built on a foundation that doesn't have a secret second page. The silence isn't heavy anymore. It's just quiet. And quiet is something I can finally afford. That's my story. It's not the one I would have written for myself when I was 20, but it's the one that made me free. If you've ever been told your worth is tied to how much you can give, or if you've ever been called a mistake by the people who were supposed to protect you, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between your family's secrets and your own sanity? Drop your story in the comments. I'll be reading as many as I can. If this story resonated with you, you might want to check out my other video about the time my mother tried to cancel my wedding vendors behind my back. It seems the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. We release new stories every Tuesday and Friday.